thank you. I'm going to give you the perspective of FIA, Urban FIA in Texas. I think it's important to point out that we are a state agency, like Andy and Dick, and we're an FIA partner. We've been working closely with FIA for many years in terms of the rural or core FIA. And personally, I'm a resource analyst, so I'm going to come at it from things that I'm working on, which is going to be a little heavy on resource analysis and data. And I'll try to speak to some of the broader programmatic things, but my focus will be resource analysis. We'll talk a little bit about what's gone on in Austin. Mark has mentioned that, and I'll give you an update on where we are on that. And I'm also going to pick up on something else Mark talked about, which is the FIA database, the Urban FIA database. And then something that we're building here within Texas A&M Forest Service, a web application called My City's Trees. Here's a picture. I think many of you recognize this immediately as the drought monitor. I know many of you who are out west are experiencing conditions like this right now, but I'd like to kind of give you an example of why I think from an analyst perspective I'm excited about Urban FIA, and this is a good example from my perspective. So this is what we looked like in 2011. We had months and months of exceptional drought. We had over, I think, 31,000 fires and over 4 million acres of Texas land subjected to fire. And towards the end of that year, we started getting lots of calls about trees dying, and we started to really see that out on the landscape. Lots of trees showing early senescence, and difficult on the hardwoods to know if they were dead or alive, but it really kind of became a real issue. We were getting lots of calls, and I started seeing things in the press where people were speculating that we were going to lose some really large estimates of our trees. And so it's a natural thing for an agency like us, a service agency, to step in to try to do a very rapid damage assessment to kind of put the bounds on what's going on out there. And we were able to do that, and we were able to do that because, in large part, because of FIA, the Forest Inventory and Analysis data was just absolutely critical for us to be able to take our regional estimates of mortality, kind of percentage thresholds, and basically then work up to what's going on at the state level. The FIA data set was just absolutely essential. That was, and we estimated 100 million to 500 million trees, which represents 2 to 10% of our trees in the state had died. Now, we did lots of press interviews, and I would get questions along the lines from reporters of, well, I'm looking out my window right now, and I see trees that look like they're dying here in the city that I'm in, and you're saying that we're going to lose 100 million to 500 million of those. Well, that's when you get into, well, technically we're not looking at the urban trees. This survey that we did really looked at forest land, and then getting into the definition of FIA forest land. But it really was an important point to me was, you know, people, as Mark said in his first presentation, a tree is a tree is a tree, and that's how people view it. Very fine distinction of forest land and what's not forest land, because there are lots of trees that are not on forest land, and the urban forest is a large source of those. Fortunately, we have a urban forestry staff that really put together a very nice analysis, and we're able to kind of step in and answer that question of what's going on in the urban areas. This is a picture that really made the rounds for several years after the drought. This is Memorial Forest in Houston, and you can see the dead pine trees. So, but from my perspective, what Urban FIA is going to bring to the table, it's going to kind of provide that seamless urban to rural monitoring. And so the types of analyses that we currently do on rural forest we'll be able to do on urban, plus we'll have access to all the kind of iTree types of information that have been provided for cities. And to kind of drive home the point about the importance of the remeasurement, because I think that's probably the defining difference of what FIA is bringing to the table versus what's being done on iTree inventories that are just right now done city to city. It's this annual monitoring. And so, you know, in 2011, we have an estimate of how many trees died, but on the rural forest land, we're really able to track what's going on. And here is just a figure that shows you mortality, much like Andy showed you some mortality for ash. Here I'm looking at hardwood mortality in East Texas, and I just want to draw your attention to that green line that just jumps up. That is weather. That's what our FIA foresters have picked up as weather-caused mortality, and you can see we've just seen a huge increase in the amount of hardwood mortality on our forest land in East Texas. We've had Hurricane Rita in 2005, Hurricane Ike in 2008, and then the drought in 2011 also just really has pushed up that mortality. Well, this is critical information. This is what we need to really help us prioritize our programs. So, where we need to be thinking about doing additional work, outreach to landowners, thinking about silvicultural training, and thinking about new opportunities to try to improve this situation. We have this right now for the rural forest land, but we don't have this type of information for the urban inventory. And I see Urban FIA is going to help us have this kind of information in the future once we get it ramped up and going statewide. So there's an example of why I'm really excited about Urban FIA and how I think it's going to fit into our broader monitoring trends. Just real quickly, core FIA in Texas. We've been doing FIA in East Texas since the 30s, but the program has expanded to Central and West Texas starting in 2004, and we now collect FIA data across the whole state. I just wanted to draw your attention to this map. This is a map that's derived from FIA data and lots of very high-level sophisticated analysis, but this is the most comprehensive picture of forest land for Texas that's ever been developed. And so there's a lot of added value products that come from this FIA data just beyond estimates, but it leads to production maps and really good insights into what's going on. Let's take a look at core FIA in and around Austin. And the main point I want to make here is that the core FIA, I'm saying core FIA, but some people are, and me too, might say rural FIA or traditional FIA, and I think those all mean the same thing to all of us who are inside the ball game, so to speak, core, traditional, or rural. So I'll probably go back and forth, but those mean the same thing. And you can get a sense here, we can estimate how much forest land, and we know a lot about that forest land within the 5-county area. That red area on the map is the city of Austin. And all I'm showing here is that on our core FIA, we do collect data within cities. If it's forest land, and I think we estimated about 6 out of these 27 plots that fall in the city of Austin have forest on them, we do collect detailed data. But we can't say much about the city. We really can't say anything with any reliability about the city of Austin in terms of what's going on from just really a sample of 6 plots. And so that's what the Urban FIA is going to bring. It's going to help us really get into understanding what's going on within the city. So we started in 2014. It's a city-based model. This is a lot of what Mark Majewsky just talked about, and I'm just going to point out that it's an Urban FIA protocol, and it's an iTree eco-analysis is really what the initial products are going to be focused in on. From a state, I've kind of given you from a resource analysis perspective why I'm interested in this, but I think from a broader state agency perspective, Texas is rapidly growing in terms of population. I think if you look at the 15 most populous cities in the country right now, 4 of them are in Texas. And I think a more interesting statistic is if you look at the 15 fastest growing large cities, those with more than 50,000, I think 7 of the 15 are in Texas. And we know that urban forest is where about 85% of the population lives. And so it really makes sense from a programmatic perspective to really start to focus more in and get better, more detailed, more precise information about what's going on in our urban forest. If we zoom in on the city of Austin proper, you can see here's the distribution. So I think we said we had 27 of the core plots. We did an intensification. We added an 8x intensification, and that brought in 219 additional urban plots. And so now we've kind of hit that magical 200 number that Dave Nowak has for the iTree. And one thing that's really different in terms of what we've done in Texas that we felt was important to get this program up and running was to accelerate the plot measurement. Mark alluded, and we have measured all of these base plots the first year within the city of Austin, and therefore we've got the data we need and are producing a report right now. So what are the deliverables? I'm kind of in this in-between stage. We have the data collected. We've got the analysis done. It's just at the printer getting put into a very nice product. So I'm not going to go in depth into results yet because those haven't been officially released. We're scheduled to have that by the end of the year. But I'm going to turn now and talk a little bit about the Urban FIA database and the My Cities Trees application that we're building and give you some insight what those two are. Again, from my resource analysis perspective, these are things that I'm heavily involved in. So the Urban FIA database, for me, a real strength of the FIA program, particularly, compared to where it was in the 90s or before, is just the open and transparency of the program, the process, and the data. We are providing through this Urban Public Database the trees that were measured in Austin, what the measurements were taken on those, what plots they fall on, all the way up to more of the statistical things that are needed to do the population estimates. I saw a question posted earlier by someone asking if we'd be able to know, like, can you tell us public versus private? Yes, we'll be able to do that because every tree is associated as being on public or private land. So not only will it be, here's how many trees are in a city, but here's how many we estimate are on public land or how many are on private land. So all of that will be possible because of the database being accessible for analysts like myself to download the data and then work up and do new analyses. And that's what's real exciting from my perspective, is the things that we're going to be able to do above and beyond what comes out in a hard copy report. Here's an article from the Wall Street Journal. This is one that I think I read last fall as we were thinking about, well, what kinds of new analyses might we want to do? And, it really hits the point that every city, things differ. Someone mentioned a question about invasives. Obviously, there are certain cities where invasives are very important, and there's a lot of focus in on that. In Texas, invasives are important, but like I mentioned earlier, growth and urbanization are just really, really important topics right now. This map from the Wall Street Journal shows how San Antonio has expanded and over time. Well, that got me thinking it would be really neat is if we could produce estimates for trees by these different kind of areas of expansion by decade. Well, we're going to be able to do that with the public urban database. I mean, this isn't something that we would expect iTree or FIA, which are more nationally focused, is to be able to identify all these city-specific issues, but because we are really pushing to have this public urban database made available and this transparency of the data, we, Texas A&M Forest Service, or working with cities or anyone really, will be able to do their own analyses and work up estimates. So here's the map that we have for Austin. Fortunately, there's very good data sets from the city of Austin about how the city has grown over time, and we've intersected it with the plots, and we'll be looking at questions like, well, are trees in that kind of orangish pink area, kind of the core city, or do they tend to be smaller or bigger than trees on the outer areas that have been developed more recently, like the blue areas? Those will all be possible with a public urban database. The last topic I wanted to cover was My Cities Trees. This is a web application that we're building, and we're following up on the success of Texas Forest Info. If you have a chance, I encourage you to go to texasforestinfo.com. You'll see a whole series of applications. Several of them serve up FIA data. Again, getting back to this idea that the data is publicly available, we're able to create our own, tailor the information, and create our own applications that are really structured around questions that people in Texas, or in this case, people in a city might have. And so we're building an application. We're working with a company called Techno Silva out of San Diego. Very excited to be working with them. We've had really good success in some of our early projects with some of the principal people, and we're real excited to be working with them. I'm going to show you some of the kind of mock-ups that we've kind of come up with. These may or may not be the final design, but they kind of give you a sense of the type of application that we're building. And so what you see here is a map. In this case, the city of Austin is shown in red. You see some information about the city of Austin, and then you see some results from the urban inventory. And so in the upper left corner, I've got Austin selected. This app will be scalable. We'll be able to add in cities, and as we remeasure Austin, we'll be able to add in different years of Austin data to see how the estimates have changed over time. I'll cover the themes in a minute, but right now I just want you to focus in on that select my area, city of Austin. You can see there's 195,000 acres. The population as of 2010 census is just under 800,000 people. And we had a total of 206 plots that were measured as part of the inventory. We estimate there's about 33.9 million trees in the city of Austin. You can see ash, juniper, cedar elm, and live oak, so we get some detail on how those numbers break down. And there are a lot of ash juniper trees in the city of Austin. There on the left, you see some of the different iTree output that we're going to serve up, just numbers of trees, carbon, value, leaf area. Energy is one we're not sure if we're going to be able to do. We do have estimates for what the energy savings have been for the city of Austin, but this may be one of those ones that we're not able to break down into smaller areas. Here, rather than focusing on the city of Austin, we've selected what we're calling a theme, in this case land cover, and now we're breaking down the estimates by, in this case, evergreen forest. You can select one or many of the categories within land cover, and this application will serve up those estimates. So we can see here that evergreen forest is really only about 17% of the city, but it's got half the trees. I think that's kind of interesting. Some of the other themes that we're looking at are city growth. That's that kind of annexation map that I showed you. Watersheds are real important. As you drive around Austin, you will see signs that you're leaving one watershed and entering another. So we're going to serve up the estimates based upon watershed. Then also, Austin falls in a very interesting area ecoregion-wise. It's just a confluence of several different ecoregions all come together in that area, and we'll serve up the estimates, breaking it down by ecoregion. And finally, the last figure that I have is just going to, here we're serving up count data, but obviously the user will be able to select carbon or value, and when they do that, here they've selected carbon, you can see that the carbon, well, only 43% of the carbon, 50% of the trees are in evergreen forest, but 43% carbon. And whereas Texas persimmon was the third most common in terms of number, that has now dropped out, and you can see cedar elm, going to be larger trees. There are fewer of them, but they're larger, they have more carbon, are now ranking in the top 3. So that's a quick overview of what we have going on in Texas, and I'll go ahead and stop now and turn it over to the moderator.